Hello and welcome to this special dialogue series, Deeper Reforms, Better Opportunities, focusing on China's comprehensive reforms. In this episode, we'll discuss China's reform of innovative technologies. In recent years, China has been increasingly regarding innovation as a focus of China's high-quality economic development. As a result, great progress has been made in emerging industries and tech innovation. So what does all this emphasis on innovation tell us about China's reform path? How can we characterize China's progress in developing new quality productivity through new tech and innovation? How to complete the transformation from mass-produced in China to created in China? And what are China's strengths and weaknesses in the future development of innovative technology? Join us for our discussion from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo.
A decade ago, China was at a turning point in changing its growth model, shifting from traditional methods to innovation-driven development. This shift paved the way for numerous technological advancements that have put China on the global innovation map. From 2012 to 2023, China's funding for basic research increased from $6.8 billion to $30 billion. Nationwide, technology contracts exceeded $800 billion, and additional R&D investment exceeded $400 billion. In 2023 alone, 950,000 new technology contracts were signed in China, and authorized invention patents reached 921,000, an increase of 15.3% over the previous year. Through major reforms in talent cultivation, incentive mechanisms, and international talent recruitment, China's National Innovation Index has risen from 34th to 12th, solidifying its status as an innovative nation. From renewable energy, mobile payments, and cross-border e-commerce, China is also sharing its innovative achievements with various regions and countries, fostering global sustainable development.
Joining me today are Michele Geraci, former Undersecretary of State in the Ministry of Economic Development of Italy, Dr. Edward Xie, founder and CEO of Feng Advisory Company, and Mehri Madarshahi, former UN senior economist and also honorary professor at South China University of Technology, and Dr. Marina Yue Zhang from the Australia-China Relations Institute of University of Technology, Sydney. Welcome to Dialogue. So, Mehri, I will start with you. There are reports of China's progress in innovation, in technologies. Tell us your impression, as not everyone is familiar with the Chinese progress here.
Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. China is transitioning, or has tried actually since 10 years, to transition from the manufacturing-based economy to a more innovation-driven economy. And naturally, one of the most important issues in this particular journey are technological innovation. China has made significant strides in science and technology development in particular in recent years. And I'm not only talking about artificial intelligence, AI, which China has become a global leader in AI research and development. And the Chinese companies like Alibaba, Baidu, and also Tencent are the forefront of this AI innovation, and they work very closely with the government. And China has built one of the largest 5G networks and invested in its development in the last few years. Renewable energy, we are all aware of that. And the Chinese innovative approach to solar, to wind, and to hydrogen use source of energy is quite known around the world. And of course, China is doing its best to develop that to a kind of form that could be stored and the storage facilities now is in the process of development. Space exploration is something which has amazed almost everybody, and China has already gone to the back of the moon and came back with a sample of the soil, which none of the other countries so far have been able to manage it. And remote healthcare.
Yes.
Healthcare monitoring is one of the things that China has been extremely advanced in there.
Right. Marina, I mean, of course, if you compare, I mean, if China compares, today's progress with its past, I mean, the progress is impressive. What about the comparison with the other countries, in particular with the United States, which is in a leading position in terms of innovation? For example, in AI, China is playing catch up. And now people are worrying about whether the gap is widening. How do you characterize where China is in terms of innovation now?
In terms of China's innovation, impressive innovation performance achievements in the past, I think there are several important factors that have contributed to this impressive growth. One is the interactions between the government and enterprises, specifically government's support role in building innovation ecosystems. In such ecosystems, there are two things. One is clusters, regional-based clusters. That is the force of convergence of innovation. And the other one is China has been participating in the global value chain. So this is the opposite force of innovation, that is diffusion of innovation. Those two factors actually seem contradictory, but they're building the base for China's innovation. But in terms of comparing to other countries, especially the United States, you can see this model has built China very innovative, especially based on manufacturing and mass production. And this is actually good innovation. All innovation comes from manufacturing. Otherwise, without commercialization, your inventions actually have no value. So United States is very much driven by entrepreneurship, innovation-based growth, and you name it, Silicon Valley and all those tech breakthroughs. And if China is following the trajectory China has built in the past 10 to 20 years, well, the future would be great for China. But China's rise, of course, challenging the dominance of technological innovation position of the United States. So China is, the future of China's innovation obviously is geopolitical factors. Otherwise, China will have a bright future.
Edward, if you look at the progress, of course, as Marina mentioned, it's really about interaction, like a fusion with the world, working together with the world. China is making progress. But now it's mostly probably somehow will be forced to do so, relying on the so-called indigenous innovation. Do you think China has a foundation? China has been trying, remaining open to the outside world. How do you see these challenges, for China?
I think the point about geopolitics is a real one, and the Chinese development, including innovation, has been hampered quite a bit by what happened over the last six, 8 years because of a lot of the sanctions. At the same time, over the course of reform and opening up in China, the Chinese have gradually experimented and learned about how to do things in a new way. And a lot of this development, of course, benefited from interaction with the rest of the world. But at the same time, a lot of development also happened internally within China because of the China's innate capability and the innate strength. In particular, leveraging its huge reservoir of talent, potential market, as well as the ancient civilization and history. That combination actually given China an internal consistent reasons why it was able to generate the kind of innovation that we are now seeing. At the same time, the external issues, the sanctions, as well as the increasing collaboration with the rest of the world, i.e. the global South countries, are actually happening at the same time. So the picture is a little bit mixed, but at the same time, to assume that just because of this geopolitics, China will not be able to continue to advance, I think that would be a misunderstanding of the situation.
Miguel, tell us some larger picture or larger background of China's kind of a shift, from relying on previously like a property sector or this traditional manufacturing to innovation-based or innovation-driven model of economic expansion. What is the logic? What is the consideration?
Thank you. The logic, I make it very simple. Economic growth comes from mainly from four factors: land, people, capital, and the fourth element, we call it innovation, productivity. We put all the stuff in there. So of course, land cannot grow. Population has peaked and will decline. Capital has been the driving force of China economic growth of the last 30 years. Let's remember China has the highest investment to GDP ratio of the larger important countries around the world at around 40%. So given that this cannot continue because investment and more money creates debt, and indeed China debt to GDP has increased, the fourth element that can stimulate growth is indeed innovation. So it completely makes sense for China to transition from an investment-led growth. We also have to be a little bit aware that all the investment that goes into innovation, all the startups, they don't all have to be successful, but the great advantage of China versus other countries is that the successes or the new invention or the new technological innovation tend to be much more available to the rest of the country. Whilst in the US, innovation tends to be maybe accumulated only in the hands of a few people or few entrepreneurs. China, with the various levers that it has, can allow the flourishing and the free spirit of innovation to generate new ideas and new products, but also there is the strong and good presence of the state that manages how this innovation then needs to be put to the, make it available for other companies, for the whole population.
Earlier, as Marina talked about the U.S., the geopolitical factor. We know the U.S. is hitting hard on China's innovation. For example, recently they basically removed this the right to export technology products to Huawei, for example, Chinese company Huawei, and of course a lot of export ban to the Chinese market. Because that's saying Chinese innovation is a threat, is a challenge to the U.S. domination. How do European countries see the Chinese innovation?
I tell you, it's a very important question, and I want to separate what I think will happen from what I think should happen. What I think should happen in the interest of our European countries is to help the growth of the Chinese economy. For us in Europe, we should want a healthy, stable and prosperous China, just like we want a healthy, prosperous and stable world. So this would be the logical answer. We should not prevent. There is no gain, neither it can be done. This idea that we can contain the growth of China just lives in the minds of certain politicians, but it is completely disconnected from the reality. So we should, in fact, foster a stronger China. For me, as an Italian, also politician, I want the Chinese market to grow because my Italian economy relies on export. So I want the Chinese to buy my Italian goods.
Yes.
Now, this is what I think should. What I'm afraid will happen is the politicians in Europe will just follow, copy and paste the, let's say, instruction, guidance from the United States. And we saw it recently. Biden has imposed a 100% tariff on electric vehicles. completely useless because China sells $0 of EV into the US, but it's a political move for, of course, electoral purposes. What has the EU done? Has copied that policy, this time with a detrimental effect, because we actually do buy electric vehicles from China. But instead of hurting only the BYDs, it has hurt and will hurt the Western company. In fact,
Yes.
those who complain with the EU about this EV tariff are the German car manufacturers and even Tesla, because we do import made in China, but we import made also by Western companies. Mm-hmm. So there is a disconnect between what is efficient for our economy and what, unfortunately, certain politicians will do that would not just try to hurt China, but it will then hurt our own economies.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Marina Zhang, help us break down, what are the key elements to the Chinese, let's say so far, success story? If you read this article from The Economist, which calls China as a superpower, a scientific superpower, and it mentions about the key element like money, equipment, people, basically investment, the people, the equipment. Probably I should add the right policy. What has China been doing in this regard?
As I argued in my book and in various publications, China's innovation actually is a result of an ecosystem. So it's like a life organism. It's not somebody who's planning from the top. Mm-hmm. Nobody has this God's view or bird's view, and is really an interaction between the bottom up and the top down forces, fusion in the middle. So I think to say money is really misleading in terms of how to interpret China's innovation machine. China's innovation machine actually is really in the past 20 years is not overnight success. Just to bear in mind, China's innovation success is not overnight success. So this different from many Western politicians' statement or economists' statement, okay, China suddenly becomes this scientific powerhouse. No, China has been doing this for over 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And is multiple factors, and the policy is one of them, but is not the determining factor.
Okay. What are the determining factors?
Millions of enterprises and entrepreneurs, they take risks, educated risks, and supported by the markets in China. So China's scale and scope, the economy scale and scope actually is not just at one side, the supply side or demand side, actually are at both sides. And we can see China's development, for example, in the solar panel industry and in the more broad renewable energy sector. You can see government support plays a small role that actually is not supporting the suppliers. They are supporting the consumers to adopt technologies. Without consumers adopt technology actually has no value. Mm-hmm. So these interactions actually made China's innovations cost-effective at a global scale.
Let's take a look. I mean, investment, most people would agree probably. If you look at the country who are doing well in innovation, there is a huge investment. I mean, if you look at the Chinese investment, for example, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, during the past 30 years, China's scientific research funding has increased nearly 96 times from less than 35 billion yuan in 1995 to over 3.3 trillion yuan last year. The economy, we know, has long, heavily dependent on the manufacturing and real estate sector, and it is entering a new stage of growth. How do you look at the Chinese market? Let's assume, U.S. is decoupling from China, trying to suffocate the Chinese innovation.
As you know, I've been working in China for over 30 years. I work with numerous entrepreneurs, businesses, government officials, and both multinationals, Western multinationals, as well as local companies. I think I have a pretty good picture of how this whole thing evolved. I still remember vividly when people were calling China as the copycat nation. copycatting, right? In Chinese, we call it 山寨. And that was not too long ago, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And today, everyone, including the economists and many mainstream media, and also our panelists here, we're all talking about China's innovation. And why is that? Why did it happen only, let's say, in less than 2 decades? I think, these factors that we talk about money, about capital, about people, and so on, those are necessary but not sufficient. In my view, what's sufficient is that the Chinese government have somehow figured out a way through the reform and opening up process that there is a way of growing the country in such a way that it is sustainable on a long-term basis on its own, really. On its own, really. Of course, China has been a big part of the globalization effort over the last 2 decades. China's not going away from that. At the same time, the Chinese have figured out an internal process of how to make it work. I think Dr. Marina Zhang was mentioning some of that already, which is the power of the entrepreneurs. But at the same time, it's not just about the entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but I say that the entrepreneurs has been very grateful for the opportunities that the Times have given to them. And what is the Times? The Times is manifested by China's government's policies, by the evolution and availability of the right kind of technology. 15 years ago, it was the wireless internet. Today, you can say it's AI or blockchain or whatever. Technology also evolved. And it is that combination of the top-down governments from Beijing setting policies and directions, not trying to control everything, but they set the policies. The grassroots level, as Dr. Marina Zhang talked about, there are many, many entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out a way to make money and to grow, and they look at the central government's policy as a guidance. What's important is actually often at the middle, at the local government level. Capable local governments are actually helping many businesses to grow in such a way that it would be impossible for the businesses to grow just by themselves. They provide funding, they provide incubation, they provide whatever. And a lot of companies were able to grow because of the support of the local governments. Of course, the local governments will work in synchronization with the national goals set by Beijing. That's how the system works. And the Chinese have figured that out. And Chinese continue to experiment and try to fine-tune it. It's not a perfect model. It's a dynamic model. The Chinese have not, sort of say that we have figured out the end game. There's no end game yet. It's still a very dynamic process. But that process is going on.
Miguel, earlier you also mentioned about the role of the Chinese government. Tell us more about, if you look at right now or the future, what kind of a role Chinese government has played in fostering probably an environment for innovation, or give a free hand probably for the enterprises, for the scientists or tech people to experiment and to pursue their innovation. And what policies have been there, probably that's helpful for innovation.
Well, we have one clear example, the China Manufacturing 2025, that has 10 sectors that years ago the government had identified as industrial sectors that were encouraged. Now, of course, we must clarify maybe some misunderstanding. It is the innovation in China is a unique mix of government policies, in my view, government incentive, facilitators, and of course, you then need the actual entrepreneurs that take that path. But it is the government that advises what would be the easiest path. So if in China manufacturing, we talk about quantum computing, solar panel, robotics, and so on, it is clear that if I'm an entrepreneur, I smartly choose to do something within those, for example, 10 sectors that have had the blessing of the central government, because then I know, like Edward said, I will then be able to get financing from the local government, who in turn reacts to the guidelines from the central government. I know that there will be facilities in place for me to set up a startup in a certain county, in a certain city. So the system works on a kind of maybe like a yo-yo, a cascade top down and then bottom up. So it is clear that a government policy alone will not stimulate innovation. You need the agent, and the agent are the entrepreneurs. You mentioned the Huawei ban. I was involved as member of government in Italy, and this is something that goes back to 6 or 7 years ago. We now have the problem with semiconductors, and China has developed 5 nanometer semiconductor. They didn't do it last night when NVIDIA was stopped from exporting its microchips. China knew that this was coming and has invested in the development of small microchips of the dimensions that would make it comparable with those of Western countries. But it is the government, so this is not something that an individual can do. You do need the umbrella of a large, strong, and capable government that set policies, advises the financial system to act on those policies, and advises the local government to implement those policies and facilitate all those entrepreneurs that knock on the door of the local attraction investment bureau of a city government, so that the system works in an harmonious way. So far, I think very successful and very well advanced, to the point that maybe China does not need the Western technology anymore, or will need it as much as before in the very near future.
Miguel, as we are talking, an important meeting is ongoing, which is called the third plenary session of the CPC Central Committee. So it's about long-term economic policies for the next 5 to 10 years. Any expectation of new policies probably that will touch upon this sector, the tech, innovation, high-quality development?
I think the focus will be on how to translate this innovation into improving the livelihood of the 1.4 billion people, so that there is a translation from views, policy, and targets into the standard of living of the Chinese people. And I tell you, I've been in China more than 10 years. I've seen it. The government has said that we do high-speed railway. And they did it, and now it's the best in the world, and this has impacted positively the life of people. And this is what I would expect the plenum to focus on.
On that note, we come to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.